Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. This is another one of our interview pieces that is the ongoing process of trying to explore the complexity that exists around not just the Grassy Mountain mine proposal with Northback, but also the greater conversation around opening up coal mining in the eastern slopes. I am so grateful for the conversation that I get to have today and a little bit nervous, don't mind saying, um, because this is a very powerful voice that is joining us today. I am so excited to welcome to the show Adam North Peigan, who is the chairman of the Pecani Mountain Valley Society. How did I do, sir?
You did good. You
Thank you.
did good. Yeah.
Very generous of you. Um, so before we get into the conversation about the coal mines, if you can talk a little bit about who is Adam North Pagan.
Okay. So, well, good afternoon there, Nate, and very, very honored and pleased to be here today to share some important discussion about an issue that we're facing in the province of Alberta and how it's going to impact the First Nations. But yeah, my name is Adam North Peigan, and I'm from the Piikani First Nation, and that's in the southwest corner of the province of Alberta. And we are the only First Nation across Canada that is in closest proximity to Grassy Mountain. So what's going on there is within our ancestral territory. But anyways, I've been my career really has been focused on addressing reconciliation, for the Indigenous people on the colonization that happened, over hundreds and hundreds of years when government imposed, policies upon our people that resulted in the residential schools, 60 school, day schools, missing and murdered, and the list goes on and on. So I've been employed with First Nation governments, in senior management as well as the not-for-profit sector in the Indigenous community. And I've actually served in leadership in my community as well as an elected member of chief and council. So I have a governance background behind me as well. But I'm currently living in Edmonton in Treaty Six territory. But just because I live in Edmonton here does not negate the myself being from the Piikani First Nation. And even though I live off reserve, I'm still very, very much in tune to what's going on at home because whatever happens at home, it's going to affect myself, my family, and future generations. So, I'm an active lobbyist and working with my community and our opposition of open pit coal mining along the eastern slopes, particularly with Grassy Mountain.
Thank you so much for that, sir. I want to start off the conversation, if I may, um, addressing the complexity that is uh, finding a representative voice when we're talking about First Nations issues. And this is a conversation that I've tried to introduce on the show before, and it has to do with the idea there is something of a break that occurred because of the colonization piece that you spoke of, where there were traditional ways of leadership, and then Canada came along and said, "Well, how about we do the Indian Act instead?" and enforced a bunch of different things. And there is, I, from what I understand, I'm choosing my language so carefully because I want to be respectful. Um, from what I understand, there is a still conflict that exists within many First Nations communities because those two things exist simultaneously. And I'm wondering if you can talk about sort of the difference between elected leadership and hereditary leadership and how the responsibilities differ.
Wow, that's a good question. Geez, where do I begin? You know what? Where I begin, Nate, is that what has happened now is that the First Peoples across Canada, including the Piikani First Nation, um, we we are in a situation where when we have dealings with the government of Canada, it's become a very paternalistic relationship. And that's something that is really, really needs to change. The reason that it's like that is because of when treaties were signed, with the First Peoples, and particularly in my area in Treaty 7, treaty was signed in 1877 at Blackfoot Crossing in Siksika Nation, right? And the government of the day, really wanted to you know, um, assimilate assimilate our people, and take away our rich values of our culture, our traditions, our ceremonies, and basically assimilate us into mainstream society. And that's the reason why treaties were signed, was to kind of shovel us off into reserves, and because prior to that, we were very nomadic. We traveled and we roamed, and and we were very easy to strike up camp and move our camp because we had to follow the buffalo, because the buffalo, we are very dependent. Historically, we are very dependent on the buffalo for food, shelter, and clothing, and that's how we survived. And, so we had to be very nomadic to be able to move with the buffalo. And that was before reserves. But during that time, our traditional leadership was, through a hereditary system, right? And, where, it was decided within the community, who would be best to provide that leadership, with our tribe. And usually it was it was a hereditary based through through a clanship, right? And we were, so that's how we were governed historically. And it's my opinion that I think that it worked very, very well for us during that time. But then, like I said, when treaties were signed, that really changed the entire scope of of how we live together as a community, because we were shoveled off into reserves, right across Canada. And and a lot of our values and the way that we used to live our lifestyle completely changed, where our ceremonies were taken away from us. There was a time in our life where we were actually, imprisoned, if we, practice our ceremonies. We were, there was just so many things that had happened that really caused a lot of chaos, within our communities, because government wanted us to go from living off the land to, participating in agriculture, which was very, very foreign to us, and so it caused a lot of chaos. And what has happened is, with the Indian Act, that's a very historic piece of legislation that has not changed since treaty has been signed. And that Indian Act really, up until this day, it really, you know, um, controls the First Peoples in Canada on how they should live, how they should make decisions, and even, to the point of what our governance system is going to look like, right? Because they implemented an electoral system. That's not our system as First Peoples. That's a colonized system that's in place. And the thing is that so today you have these elected chief and councils, and I often, hear a lot of our people refer to those elected leaders as, um, you know, um, that they're Indian Act, government leaders. They're and I guess for myself, I have to admit that full disclosure that I have served in leadership through that system. And when I was serving in leadership in that through that system, I really found that the government of Canada had their way of imposing their own agendas on the First Peoples, through comprehensive funding agreements. You know what I mean? And those agreements were signed with First Nation communities. But within those agreements, the First Peoples were not allowed to be able to make decisions in what they felt was in the best interest of their own people. Rather, we had to conform and go along with what Canada felt was in the best interest of our people. So it's been like that, for over 100 years. And that's why I say the system that's in place right now is a very, very paternalistic relationship that we have with the government of Canada. It's not working because it doesn't allow the First Peoples in Canada to have that autonomy to be able to make decisions on what they think is in the best interest of their community, right? So it's really, and it really does need to change, and that's a result of colonization. And, so when we're talking about reconciliation with the Indigenous people, Canada really needs to recognize and be willing to make some big changes in how we govern ourselves and how we live our lives. And until that changes, we're always going to be in this paternalistic, relationship that exists today. So and the Indian Act really needs to be thrown out. Basically, it needs to be thrown out and it needs to be replaced with something else that is more suitable to the First Peoples in Canada. So I hope that kind of helps to sum it up for you a little bit there.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was hoping for because I think it's really, really important for people to understand that when we're talking about how decisions are made in regards to, especially when we're talking about reserves, the decision making structure that exists on reserves is one that has been imposed on reserves to begin with. So it's fraught right from the very, very start. Um, and so I wanted to lay that out for.
Yeah. But you know what? If I can just interject too, Nate, because this is kind of interactive, right? An interactive discussion. You know what? Before treaties were signed, remember I was telling you that we were very nomadic and we lived off the land, and we would roam, and we would pitch camp, we would stripe camp, we would, because that's what we had to do. It was our survival. When the Indian Act, and the treaties were signed, we were almost like put on reserves like cattle. We were, almost, and it was like a community, it was like a pasture, and they corralled all the First Nations and they put them on reserves, almost like like being herded up by like cattle, right? But during that time, the First Peoples never, never, ever surrendered that that territory that is now off reserve. That is our ancestral territory. We never ever surrendered that to the crown. So today we are still claiming our inherent right to our ancestral territory that is off the reserve boundaries, because those reserve boundaries are Indian Act boundaries. You know what I mean? So we never surrendered our territory.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite things to do when I get separatists up in my face is say, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say this, is there is no part of Alberta that is not covered by treaties that precede the formation of Alberta as a province. So if you want to separate, then what you're going to have to do is get all of the signatories of those treaties to trust the white folks this time. Uh, I think that might be a stretch. I don't know.
Yeah, it is
Uh,
a stretch. Yeah.
um, let's talk about there's some geography that I want to lay out as well for our audience because when we're talking about Pekani, um, the watershed that's affected by Grassy Mountain literally runs right through the middle of Pecani. Now, I don't want to take away anything from your statement about the all of the land that was never surrendered. Um, One of the things that has been positioned in this conversation is that the current Pecani leadership has said, "Yeah, no, we're cool with the Grassy Mountain mine." I'm paraphrasing heavily, um, but I think it's really, really important for people to understand how directly impacted in a bunch of different ways the Pecani Reserve is affected by this mine. So there's been lots of concerns raised about the potential for the watershed to be polluted, to be damaged, selenium, blowing coal, all of that kind of stuff. And it's really important to highlight that the Pecani Reserve is directly downstream from the Old Man Reservoir, which is where the Crow's Nest River flows into, which is where Blairmore Creek flows into, and Blairmore Creek literally comes off the side of Grassy Mountain. Um, I'm wondering if you can talk about your when did this mine first show up on your radar as a point of concern for you?
You know what? For me personally, I would say in and around the pandemic. You remember when we were going through a global pandemic, coronavirus and COVID-19, and everybody was wearing masks. You know what I mean? Like, I can't believe I lived through my lifetime to see something like that. You know what I mean? But so when the pandemic was happening, what I was noticing on social media is that I started to see a lot on social media, that our nation members at home were posting on social media, their concerns about open pit coal mining, along the eastern slopes at Grassy Mountain. And I started to see not just once, not just twice, not just three times, but a lot of times I would see our nation members posting their concerns, right? And so it really caught my attention, because I started to see it repeatedly, right? And then I had, some nation members reaching out to me, and asking me what my thoughts were, and what I thought about it, what I think, and I guess there were some community members that have noticed that I am a good leader. I have that qualities and those skills to be a leader, right? So they asked me if I would get involved, and I kind of sat on it for a little bit, because I was kind of busy with my own career, doing other things. But when I started to see those posts, repeatedly, that's when I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to do something about it. We need to do something about it. So I started to do my own research about, what was going on. And I found out that, our current, the leadership of the day, was really, really pushing and supporting um, open pit coal mining, and at that time it was Benga Mines. And they were really, really supporting it. But yet on the other side, I was seeing a lot of our members that were really concerned. So we brought together I brought together some nation members and some elders, and I went and I talked to some of the elders, and what we decided to do is we decided to have ceremony. And through ceremony, um, we were transferred the name of the Mountain Child Valley Society through ceremony by our elders, and we formed an ad hoc group, and they became the core group of nation members that we were going to start looking at working towards, being a voice for those nation members that felt they didn't have a voice. And the leadership of the day, they weren't really being open and transparent with our community members. They weren't sharing information, because consultation was happening, but it was happening with chief and council, and that's where it stopped. And nothing was getting to the members. So So we started to have, facilitate meetings over social media, and eventually more members became involved. And by the end of the day, we had a vast majority of nation members from the grassroots that were coming together to let our chief and council know that, this is not a good idea. It's not in the best interest of our people, not for today, but for many generations to come. For our grandchildren and great grandchildren. So, and we started to form a good partnership with, our non-native brothers and sisters, environmental groups from off reserve who shared the same concerns, and we developed a partnership and we started a lot of letter writing campaign, to the Alberta government, the government of Canada, Alberta Energy Regulator. We even facilitated a rally, where we had a convoy of vehicles, that came down from the Crow's Nest Pass and travel, and we all traveled together along Highway 3 going east into Brockett, and we had a big rally there, so we were becoming very active and we worked with a lot of our partners. And at the end of the day, after about a year and a half or so, um, the joint review panel, made a ruling that it was not in the best interest of Albertans to have open pit coal mining on the eastern slopes. And then the Alberta Court of Appeal rejected Benga Mines' application. And then finally, the government of Canada, the former Minister of Energy, Jonathan Wilkinson, on behalf of Canada, issued a statement that Canada was not going to support it. So at that time we were really really happy, our advocacy group, because not only were we battling our own leadership, but we were battling the government of Canada, the government of Alberta, the Alberta Energy Regulator, and they all ruled, in our favor. So it was a day to celebrate because it was our opinion that we felt that our ancestral territory was forever going to be protected, right? Because and so things went kind of quiet for a bit, right? It went kind of quiet for a bit, for probably about a year, another year and a half, and then all of a sudden we kind of heard that there was another company, North Holdings, was pursuing permitting at Grassy Mountain again. And through our research, we found out that North Holdings was the exact same company of Benga Mines. And the same person, Gina Reinhardt, who was from Australia, was still, going to pursue, you know, uh, you know, uh, coal mining activities at Grassy Mountain. So what they did is they rebranded themselves and basically renamed themselves from Benga Mines to Northback Holdings to continue that process, right? So we became active again. The Mountain Child Valley Society, we became active again, and we've been really working hard, in our aggressive lobbying to let again, Alberta Energy Regulator, the Alberta government, and the government of Canada, as well as our own leadership of today, that this is not in the best interest of our community for now and many generations to come. And where we're at right now is our current chief, is supporting the exploratory permit, open drilling, right, where they're going to extract samples and then the technicians or the scientists will determine whether or not it's really in the best interest to actually go full tilt on open pit coal mining here. So our current leadership at home is supporting that exploratory permit, but the members are saying that no, you need to stand up and advocate for no to coal in the southwest corner of the province of Alberta, because where the Grassy Mountain is, that's within Piikani First Nation ancestral territory. Historically, before treaties were signed, that was our area where we went to hunt, fish, gather, and have our ceremonies there. And we went also there to go pick our medicines, our herbs, right? So that was part of our community. And Grassy Mountain in that area was actually named the Crow Eagle Reserve, right? Before treaties were signed. And because that was our territory, right? So as stewards to the land, we have an inherent right to stand up and protect Mother Earth and the environment and everything within our ancestral territory. So, we're that's kind of where we're at now and how we got to where we're at.
I'm curious, and this is where I want to try to be as fair as I possibly can be without going too far off the rails. Um, I, I have heard a lot of anecdotal speculation as to why the current chief of Picani has decided to support the exploratory drilling. I have logical questions about the exploratory drilling because they did put forward a proposal for a mine. They did estimate how much they were going to be able to get out of the ground for that mine. So it's like, if you had all of those numbers, why do you need to explore again? I don't think it's moved. But some people have cast aspersions as to why the chief is supporting it. Others have pointed out very eloquently that one of the things that Benga, then Northback, promised was upwards of 400 jobs for the area. They committed that. I'm sorry, I can see you laughing already there. Um, 400 jobs for the area. Now, how many of those jobs would actually go towards members of the Piikani Nation? Eh. But they also, their approximation of the mine from their original proposal was that it was only going to last about 6 years. I can appreciate that there is an economic potential for things to, in the very short term, be improved for some residents of the Piikani Reservation. Um, do you think, what's driving the support that is coming from the band council? Is there, like, I would love to get your thoughts on that, sir.
You know what? That's a good question, Nate. And I guess the thing, you know what? Northback Holdings, well, even Benga Mines before, but Northback Holdings today, they have actually pumped in resources into the Piikani First Nation through our Piikani Securities, our Piikani Resource Development Limited company, Piikani Employment and Training, Piikani Travel Center, as well as community events. So they have pumped in resources into our community. And the thing is that you know, I, I just wanted to make it abundantly clear that it is the position of the Piikani Mountain Child Valley Society that we do support jobs coming into our community. We do support economic revenue, to come into our community to sustain our economy. But it there's better ways to do it, through renewable energy and projects that are more friendlier to the environment, right? So the thing is that, yeah, you know what, Northback, Benga Mines, Gina Reinhardt, they have made promises to the community that it's going to really, really, generate our economy. It's going to create jobs. But the thing is that, like I said, there's better ways to do it. And the thing is that um, the whole thing about reclamation too is another big part as well. Reclamation, and the thing is that if Grassy Mountain is allowed to happen, I mean, if open pit coal mining is allowed to happen at Grassy Mountain, they're going to be there over the course of the next 25 years, right? And producing what is a metallurgical coal, and that's what is required to make steel. And those resources are going to be pumped, outside of Canada, and they're going to go to foreign markets. And who is going to benefit from that is, Gina Reinhardt, basically Hancock. I forget what her company is called, right? They're going to walk away with billions and billions and billions of dollars. Meanwhile, the Piikani First Nation is going to be left with our ancestral territory that's going to be desecrated because of the years and years of the mining that's happened. And they say that there's going to be reclamation, But you know what, Nate, I can tell you honestly that in all other coal mining projects across Canada and probably even across the world, reclamation has never happened. You know what I mean? And so we, the Piikani First Nation, 25, 50 years down the road, we are going to be stuck with an area of our ancestral territory that's going to be forever desecrated. And you know what? I don't want my grandkids growing up and having to look out west and see that entire area just desecrated. Because right now, when you look out west, it's beautiful. The mountains are beautiful. And all you have to look at too is Frank Slide. What happened with Frank Slide? When you travel up through the Crow's Nest Pass, and you go past Lundbrick and you go and you look at Frank Slide. That should tell you right there that, you know what? Somebody was trying to tamper with Mother Earth, and this is what happened. This is the result. So it's like we haven't learned from it. And so it all comes down to greed, right? And the thing is that, you know what, the Alberta government, they've really done a good job in creating a mess in the province of Alberta. The UCP government, they've done a good job in creating a mess, and recently they announced the moratorium has been lifted, which will allow these other coal companies along the eastern slopes to continue doing their projects, right? So they've lifted that moratorium. Premier Danielle Smith, you know what she said why she did that is because those coal companies were filing litigation against the Alberta government in billions and billions of dollars. So she's saying that she needs to protect Albertans. That's why they lifted the moratorium on. And you know what? And it's not fair to us, and it's not fair to Albertans because they're the ones that created the mess because of how they've handled this coal file. The 1976 coal policy, and coming out with a big announcement that there's going to be no more new open pit coal mining along the eastern slopes, and then backtracking that and lifting the moratorium. They have created the mess, and now they want Albertans to bail them out. You know what I mean? So it's such a huge issue that's really convoluted, complex.
Yeah. What are your concerns for the water supply? Like, I want to go back to that map that I'm looking at on my screen, that has the Old Man Reservoir, and then that basically goes out to all of southern Alberta, pretty
Mhm.
much. One of the things that has been established, we've spoken to a couple of environmental scientists, and one of the things that they told me that was horrifying is there has not been a single coal operation in Alberta in the last 50 to 60 years that has not had an environmental catastrophe of one kind or another. And I hear members of the provincial government saying, "Oh no, this time we'll get it right." But even at the press conference where Brian Jean and Rebecca Schultz made the announcement, when Rebecca Schultz was asked, "Can you guarantee that there won't be any spills of selenium?" her response was, "Well, I can't guarantee it, but boy, if they do, they'll be in trouble."
So will you guarantee that there won't be a selenium problem if Grassy Mountain goes ahead?
Here's what I would say. Our job in the Department of Environment is to set the environmental standards. The AER is then the arm's length regulator who ensures that any and all companies, no matter where they are in the province of Alberta, but especially so in southern Alberta, where water and these types of concerns have been raised, that they are adhering to those high standards. If they are not, obviously the AER as the regulator has a number of levers to ensure that they are either brought into compliance or they are not operating in the province of Alberta.
And I don't know how comforting that is for anybody who's downstream. Would you mind talking about that?
You know what? It's not comforting at all when I hear our ministers talking like that because you know what, at our head, I guess the thing is, when I kind of think of our community, you know, if you look at our river valley, that the Old Man River that flows through our community, it's right from the east end to the west end, or the west end to the east end. The Old Man River flows through our community, and when you look down at the valley, it has significantly changed probably in the last, since I was a kid, a kid growing up in Brockett. And when I remember when I was a child growing up in Brockett and going down to the river valley, which we call High Bush, and all the res kids from the town site, we would go down into the valley where the river flowed, and it would be our playground. We would go down there to, as kids to camp or to play baseball, pick berries. During the winter, we go ice skating, along the Old Man River. And today that has significantly changed because of what industry has done to our community with the construction of the Old Man Dam, right? And that's just off of our reserve. But when they made that decision to build the Old Man Dam, there was an uprising of, again, some of our community members through the Lone Fighter Society that really, really tried to shut that down. But at the end of the day, it happened anyways, and it's really, really destroyed the flow of our water, through our community. And today, sadly, you don't see our young kids going down to High Bush anymore. They don't go down there the way that we did when I was a child. So with the threat of, open pit coal mining in our ancestral territory, that area is going to continue to desecrate, and we're going to see our riverbeds that are going to, they're not going to be as thriving as it is, what it used to be, and the flow of the river. And the thing is, you talk about the selenium, you know, uh, industry has a really good way, and even the Alberta government, while they're kind of wishy-washy about it, but saying that, they're going to do everything that they can to ensure that not going to be any selenium that's going to leak into our headwaters, because that's going to create poison, for our water stream, and it's going to seep into, the soil, and that's going to affect our ability to, to agriculture and First Nations tourism, along Highway 3. It's going to impact that, let alone the coal dust that's going to blow through our community, that's going to create toxicity to the air we breathe. Because we know within southern Alberta, the winds are very, very strong, right? So it's going to come through our community, and our kids and our grandchildren are going to have to live with that, and that's something that we're doing to try and stop and prevent that from happening.
What do you see as the next steps? I mean, they've lifted the coal moratorium. Daniel Smith and Brian Jean have made different sets of promises, and they have offered different interpretations of projects that go ahead. So again, creating some of that confusion that you were talking about. What do you see as the next steps going forward from here?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that could happen, Nate. Okay, I'm going to share them with you. Okay, is the Alberta Energy Regulator held public hearings, and they had one hearing that was in Pincher Creek, and they also had 3 days of hearings in Calgary. Those hearings have now concluded, right? And unfortunately, our North Back put forward, their application, and they had the opportunity to address the panel, why the exploratory permit should be allowed. Our own leadership, put forward a statement in supporting, the exploratory permit. There was others, and in our area, the only entity that was giving intervenor status was the MD of Ranchlands, and they were allowed to go to the panel and voice their concerns on behalf of a lot of Southern Albertans why open pit coal mining should not happen in the southwest corner of Alberta. And some of our Piikani Nation members, had to really advocate quite hard to go to be allowed to go on the agenda to speak in opposition of open pit coal mining. So now that those hearings have concluded, the Alberta Energy Regulator has 90 days to table a decision, okay, on the exploratory permit that North Back is trying to pursue. So that decision has to be made and tabled by the end of April. So that's going to be a very critical time because AER has to come forward with a decision on next. So if they decide to grant North Back Holdings the exploratory permit, then our fight is going to continue, right? Because like I said, when you do an exploratory permit, you extract sampling from the soil through open drilling, and that's assessed through scientists to determine whether or not it's viable to go full out, right? So so our work will have to continue. But if the Alberta Energy Regulator comes back and says, it's not in the best interest, and they deny Northback's application, dollars to donuts, they're probably going to appeal. They're going to appeal the decision, right? So we in the Peigan Mountain Child Valley Society, what we are doing is we are creating awareness within our community amongst the members about the impacts of open pit coal mining through community surveys, community presentations, holding, rallies. We've already had rallies that have been organized in Pincher Creek, Fort Macleod, and Lethbridge, and even in Calgary, and doing a lot of things through social media so that we can educate our members on the impacts of open pit coal mining. Because our chief has made public comments that he's going to put it out to a referendum, in our community, right? Whether or not that's actually going to happen or we don't know because there hasn't been a date set, but he said that he's going to put it to a referendum. And, so if indeed it does go to a referendum, we, the Mountain Child Valley Society, we have a responsibility to educate our members so that when they go cast yay or nay, that they will have that information to be able to make an informed decision, right? So, because you know what, a referendum happened in the Crow's Nest Pass. I don't know if you know about that. And unfortunately, even though there was low voter turnout, the Alberta, Northback Holdings is using those numbers to push their agenda because the ones that did come out to vote, the majority voted in favor of open pit coal mining. So, Northback Holdings is very, very sneaky about, what they've done. Another thing that in their submission to the Alberta Energy Regulator, I was really, really upset to hear that they, in their presentation to the AER, they said that there was 87% members of the Peigan Nation that supported this. That's not a true number. That's an inaccurate number. And what we've seen is that the Peigan First Nation, has been used and exploited by Benga Mines, and because Benga Mines has offered tours, they've invited elders to go up there, they've fed them, they've treated them really well. They even went to our school in the community and were providing transportation on school buses for the kids to go up to Grassy Mountain on a field trip. What did Northback Holdings do? They used those as numbers as part of that 87%. So you know what? I'm really upset that our elders and our youth are being exploited for an agenda of industry. And I'm further upset that our chief and council has allowed that to happen. They have a fiduciary responsibility to protect our members from exploitation, and they haven't done that.
And that's it. I think it's important to highlight that that's a strategy that is that Benga and Northback have utilized uh, in order to advance this project in multiple communities. We've seen the lunch programs that they've rolled out, that they've had UCP MLAs in attendance for, and the big fake checks and everything. They bought the somewhat dilapidated golf course in the Crow's Nest Pass and
Hmm.
fixed it all up, and we're having multiple community events there where they were like, "Look at how we're such a responsible community member," and there is a certain bit of, I would call it, craven marketing that's going on. And I mean, I said this in a conversation with somebody else a couple of days ago. There's, just because somebody's offering you candy doesn't mean you should get into the van. Uh,
Hmm.
it's a bit of a
Yeah,
dark metaphor, but I mean, there's some very real consequences to this project.
yeah.
What would you like people to know? Like, for people who are unfamiliar with the background, the potential consequences. There's so much here. What would you like people to know?
You know what? I would like the people to know that we, as the First Peoples, we have an inherent right to protect our ancestral territory within our communities. It's in our Constitution, and like I said, we never surrendered those lands. And and because of that, you know, um, you talk about consultation. When government goes out and consults, or industry goes out and consults, they always talk about a government to government relationship, right? And but that's a failing system, because what happens through that system is it leaves the members out, and we're excluded. And so the members are kind of walking around with blindfolds on, trying to figure out what's going on, and trying to make a decision with no information, because our elected leaders in a lot of communities do not, communicate or consult with its own members. You know what I mean? And that hasn't happened in our community, and it's really, really sad that's happened. So that whole notion of consultation, it has to change, where it not only consults with the elected leadership, but the members as well. You know what I mean? And but that's not happening. So it's really sad. And I guess another point too that I just want to state is that, it's no secret that a lot of our First Nations right across Canada, because of colonization, that we really suffer a lot within our communities with alcohol and drug abuse, poverty, education, deplorable housing conditions, and because of that, it makes us very vulnerable, right? We're very, very vulnerable. And industry is really, really good on capitalizing on that vulnerability, and, for their own agenda. And that's not right. It needs to stop, and because you know what, if you're not doing very well and paying your bills, and someone all of a sudden comes along and says, "Oh, here you go, Nate," like, you're gonna grab it, because you got to get that rent paid. You got to pay that utilities. You know what I mean? So it's wrong what's happening when our communities are being used like that because of our vulnerability. It has to stop.
How much responsibility uh, do you feel like? I don't know how to ask this question, so I'm going to stumble my way through it. Um, as when hearing you speak, there's a part of me that goes, well, hey, there's a big part of the responsibility for protecting the community that should fall to the band leadership. There's another part of me that goes, in the spirit of reconciliation, there's a big part of that responsibility that should also fall to the provincial government. There's a big part of that responsibility that should also fall to the federal government. But I'm a middle-aged white guy, so I don't want to be the one to be hang up how much responsibility for who. What are your thoughts?
You know what? My thoughts are, things really need to change in how government and industry, works with the indigenous peoples, the First Peoples. It really, really needs to change, because You talk about this thing about genocide, right? Genocide is a term that a lot of people don't like to talk about, especially when it comes to the indigenous people, right? Because of what we had to experience as part of colonization and everything. And the United Nations defines genocide as a deliberate attempt to destroy the culture and take away the language of a group. Well, you know what? The First Peoples in Canada, we are that group. And with the whole thing of what happened with residential schools, day schools, 60 scoop, and everything else, that's genocide. Canada is guilty of genocide. So this whole thing with the threat of open pit coal mining along the eastern slopes, it's and the way that government and industry is going about it, they're basically committing genocide all over again on our people. So call it for what it is. That's what I'm here to say is that the way that they're going about it is they're committing genocide against our people again, and it's not right.
Thank you for saying that, sir. And for the record, I don't disagree with you. Um, the One of the things that I think a lot of folks struggle with who are on the colonist side of things is to acknowledge these truths, to somehow say, and therefore it's my fault. And I
Hmm.
think that it's possible to say, no, that's something that's absolutely happening. And I'm going to actively choose where I want to land on either side of the conversation. And I think that silence is complicity, and especially in Canada, where there's so much work to be done when it comes to truth and reconciliation.
Hmm.
To just be like, oh, I don't want to use the scary words, is some next level lazy.
Yeah,
Probably gonna
but
get in
but you
that
know
way.
what? But how we're going to get to bring reconciliation full circle, there has to be an acknowledgement that genocide did happen, right? And then once that happens, we will be able to move things forward. And you know what, Nate, we are making some steps in that direction. You know what I mean? And I give credit to a lot of people that I do see there's a lot more mainstream people that are willing to listen and come to the table with an open mind. But the thing is that when it comes to government and industry, they don't think like that. You know what I mean? They don't think like that, and it's really really unfortunate. And but you know what? We still have a lot of work to do, Nate. I'm going to lay it out on the line. We still have a lot of work to do because the 94 calls to action that came out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you know, there's probably only been maybe I don't know 9 or 10 of those that have really been implemented. So, you know what? It's we still have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight because you know what the oppression of our people happened over hundreds of years. So it's going to take some time, but this whole thing with what's happening with the open pit coal mining and that threat, basically that's what it is. It's another act of genocide against our people, right? So, yeah, we'll just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah. I I want to thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to chat today, and
Hmm.
for everything that you've said. It has been an absolute privilege for me to have this conversation with you and to be able to hear you speak. So I want to just say thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts with our audience. And just thank you.
Yeah. And you know what, Nate, I really, really want to thank you for taking this up, because you've introduced a conversation where it may create some uncomfortableness, but I'm okay with that because you know what? It's only through uncomfortableness where we have to kind of look at ourselves, and through the uncomfortableness, it's an opportunity to grow, right? When things are always hunky dory all the time, there's really no movement happening. There's no growth happening, right? So sometimes these conversations are a little uncomfortable, but that's okay. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. So I want to thank you, Nate, for taking this on and engaging in this conversation. As difficult as maybe it was, but you know what? That's okay. At least we're talking about it.
A
So thank
hundred.
you.
I mean, my philosophy is very simple. If bad things are happening and you are finding yourself in a comfortable position, you're on the wrong side of the things. So
There
I
you
would
go.
much rather be uncomfortable when bad things are happening.
There you go.
Thank you again so much, sir.
All right. Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.